Apaji Valavella,
Here.
John Walsh.
If you'll stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So our meeting is an open meeting, so there is an opportunity for the public to comment. As you're aware, we're at the very beginning of the process, but I do believe we have no people in person here tonight to comment, but I believe we have some online.
There are 4 individuals online to comment.
Okay, so for the individuals that are online to comment, there's a limit of 5 minutes per person. So if you would please keep it to 5 minutes or less. Steve, are you there? Mr. Johnson?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
Please go ahead and address the committee.
Okay. So first, I think we want to thank the volunteers on this committee for what's truly a thankless task. We also commend you guys going through this process to not simply take the straw man proposed through RSP's analysis, but to really seek the input of the members of the committee, the community, you know, to consider if it's completely right around the edges. I believe each of you should have received a summary of concerns from our neighborhood. And when I refer to our neighborhood, it's the neighborhoods of Deer Park, currently attending Isaac Fox, to the west of Braemar. The summary of concerns that we have there, I think, really lay out 3 points. The first 2 points that we address regarding the timing of this boundary project, in the midst of upheaval and some of the difficulty really in forecasting and make decisions, as well as the concerns with emotional health for children in our district, I think speak for themselves, are very strong. They may be more appropriate to address in depth at the public input meetings on 1013 and 1014. What I wanted to spend some of the time focused on was really the final point, and I'm assuming you guys have all had the opportunity to look at this and consider our concerns with relocating our students from the community school, where they've been for the last 25 years, 1.5 miles down Cuba Road, possibly to Seth Payne, and then further 2 towns away to Middle School North. We furnished an analysis to you where we estimate, all things being equal with efficient routes, that this will remove our students from the ability to engage in learning and in extracurriculars for the equivalent of 75 school days, and that's over their K-8 career. With the first 2 goals of this boundary project being to support student and family engagement and student learning, this on its face doesn't really seem to hang with that objective, and so really wanted to question how that aligned. We also wanted to highlight the incremental road time. So today our students go 1.5 miles down Cuba Road through 1 intersection. This reroute at a minimum is adding distance, travel, and motion of 11,500 miles over their K-9 career. You know, our concerns regarding not just the time that will be spent on the bus, but additionally the safety and peril that they'll be put through going down 12 through the intersection potentially of 22 and 12 and down 22 really gives us pause. And so we wanted to raise those concerns with each of you to make sure that there was time to consider and really get comfortable as a committee with owning that safety implication for the next 20 or 25 years, if that's the decision that's made. And then finally, I think we wanted to emphasize, and obviously every parent in the district is a busy parent with a lot going on. Every parent is a parent who's had children that will have gone through a year and a half of lockdown. Our children will have gone through a year and a half of lockdown, and in the case of my 5th grader, after fighting back to a classroom as normal, we pulled away from every other student he knows and relocated to Middle School North on his own. So we want to make sure that those emotional health concerns, that just, again, some of the context for trying to accomplish this in COVID-19, as well as the potential safety hazard being introduced by putting our students on the bus for that time, is brought into consideration, but also the consideration for the parents and residents of our neighborhoods who have carefully planned and bought homes where they are and made what works as far as daycare, jobs, mass to the south, and all of those, the impact that it will have on all those individuals as well. And so those concerns are very clear to make sure everybody's consistent and is willing to open them going forward, you know, if we go forward with either of the proposals as is.
Okay, thank you very much. You had 30 seconds left if you of your time.
I'll yield to anybody who wants to make the same point. Good.
Well, thank you for your time tonight.
Yep, thank you.
Next is Mr. Mike Stockman.
Mr. Cussman, are you there?
I am.
Welcome. If you want to go ahead and address the board, you have, or the committee, you have 5 minutes. I'll give you a 1-minute warning if you're running a little long. I appreciate your understanding.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It'll probably be pretty brief. I definitely like what you say, all those things taking into consideration. I mean, they're the same questions that we have as a family. We picked this community to live in. We're about a half mile from Isaac Fox, and we're very concerned, you know, about our children having to switch schools, just like everyone else. And, you know, we would hope that you would consider, you know, if either of the plans are accepted, the potential to grandfather in students so that they can continue, you know, their education where they started it. And I mean, that's really all I have to say. And this, we were just told about this today, so we're really, you know, we have massive anxiety about it. We had no idea that this was occurring, so just a little bit concerned. But I mean, that's really all I have to say. I hope you take everyone's families into consideration, you know, with the changes that you guys are talking about implementing to our lives. So that's all.
Mr. Cussman, what neighborhood do you live in?
We live in Pine Valley.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
The final commenter is Mr. Mike Campbell.
Mr. Campbell, are you there?
Hi, yes, I'm here. How are you guys doing?
Fine, welcome.
Thank you. I'll make this short and to the point. I actually, looking at some of the familiar names I know on here. Hi, Lauren McCardle. I used to work with you at Palatine. And so I've been a school teacher for 27 years, and I've been involved with education for a very, very long time. And I know these decisions are never easy. I've been on both sides of the fence on this one or whatever. But when I started hearing this information today, the one thing that jumped out to me was I'm 1.3 miles away from Middle School South and 5.8 miles away from Middle School North. And I'm in the Braemar neighborhood, just so you guys don't have to ask that. And I went on my Google Maps, and I said, how long is it going to take me to get to both schools? And I did it at a time when there was no traffic. and they said it's a 3-minute drive to Isaac Fox, and it's Isaac Fox in Middle School South, and it's an 11.5-minute drive all the way up to Middle School North. And I started thinking about this, and one of the things that's going on in schools with the teenage mind that we know is that the teenage mind works better later in the day than it does early in the morning. And I already last year with my seventh grader right now who had for the bus, he was being picked up at 6:45 in the morning just to get to Middle School South, which is 1 mile away and 3 minutes away. And you're talking about what time are these kids going to have to get up to get to these schools where you have the middle school starting at 7:20 in the morning. And so I'm worried about the damage that you're going to do to their mental and physical well-being in terms of having them get less and less sleep over an extended period of time. And I did the math on it, and I figured out an 8-minute increase per bus ride, it results in a 46.13 extra hours on a bus over the course of a school year. And if you're 3 years in a middle school, that's 138.4 additional hours on a school bus. And this is all without taking into account any consideration of the trains that cut off the Braemar neighborhood from Rand Road. The increase in train traffic has made such a difference in the amount of time that the buses will sit there. So to echo what everybody's saying, what Mr. Johnson said, you're putting kids on a bus for possibly an extra, 5 to 6 days a year, just so you guys can redistrict to something when they're right there close. And I don't understand. So I just want to make sure that was taken into consideration of how close everything is to the, how close these are in an actual physical proximity. And it's not just about where you're putting kids for the benefit of the district. I just worry about with the early time slots and the extra time things, what time they're going to catch the bus. They'd have to catch a bus at 6:15 to 6:20 for a kid who's 12 to 13 to 14 years old. And I just want to make sure we're taking into account the kids' mental and physical well-beings also from being home in this pandemic to now not seeing their friends, to having to make new friends for their 8th grade year or 7th grade year going things. So anyway, I'll cut it short there, but I know you guys, there's a lot of good people on here. I just want to make sure you're taking into consideration the time start of the schools in combination with how long they're going to be on those buses, smelling bus fumes and trying to get things done and homework and everything. I just don't think it's in the best educational development of the children's minds.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell.
Thanks. Have a great day, guys.
We're all set, Phil?
Yeah.
Okay. So before I turn the meeting over to Rob, I have a couple items I want to mention. So there's a number of materials at your desk tonight. We have the agenda, the presentation that he's going to share tonight. We do have enlarged maps, so they're the maps that are in the presentation, but they're at a larger format, so that was a process improvement from last time. We're learning. And then I did provide the printouts of the emails that I shared with you. Some people had indicated that it was easier rather than trying to read them on their phone or their computer. We have displayed on the walls the current maps in case that turns out to be helpful. So that's the handout that Mrs. Malik, Jean gave to you last time. And you're all obviously aware that we have laptops in front of us. So as a process of improvement, one of the difficulties that Rob had was just he could see the room as a whole and not us as individuals, and trying to connect with the groups. So we're going to try this. And so we obviously have the volume turned off on the unit. So we're using the in-room sound system, which he could hear very well. And then we're going to try to spotlight the person that's speaking for Rob, and your names are on there so he can interact with you and call you by name. So I think one thing that will be helpful is my desire is not to call on you like we did last time and go around the room, but if you could maybe give a little hand signal so Rob or Phil knows that you're going to speak. I think we'll try that out and see how that works. As homework, we had hoped that you could get out and drive areas of the district that you were not familiar with. So I hope that you were able to do that. And the administration was given some homework, which was to look at the capacities for the buildings. And we did review that, and you're going to see an adjustment in what we consider to be the capacities. And when we get to that slide, Rob will speak to how we reevaluated those numbers. We just found that our first, while the target capacity was a valid number, it was really too limiting to try to make movements by the committee. So with that, I will turn the meeting over to Rob.
Good evening, everybody. Looking forward to this evening and how we've changed some of our data, some of our thoughts from your comments at the last meeting. You're going to spend more time looking at these concepts, less time hearing me talk this time. The first meeting, we had to get a lot of information out there. I'll recap a few things this evening. If I can get my computer to work. Seconds. All right, so the process that we're going to talk about is why we're here. We're going to get into some of the recapping of the boundary team information, and then we're going to jump into the different concepts that we put together for you this evening to build on everything that you heard from that first meeting. So we have some goals to recap a little bit about meeting one. You heard Vicki talk about the homework activity that you did, and we'll get into those particular concepts. Not going to read the ground rules. We did a great job last time. I do appreciate as we tried to work through those technology issues that you guys kind of went low old school on us to be able to get that information to us. We talked about consensus. We talked about how we go through the process of consensus if it's close to being 50%. We had the committee support with the consensus and the ground rules. We had a parking lot that we'll use with Zoom, where you can just type in your items, or you can give things to Vicki at the end of the meeting. We're here at the process where it's October 1st. It's our second meeting. We have 2 public inputs that we're going to work with the district. We really don't yet know what those maybe look like. We'll talk more about that, and we'll probably have some communication that goes to you as we get closer to those dates. So that we know what's happening with those. I mean, obviously with COVID, there's just some things that we have to flex a little bit. We have different roles, not going to talk about the roles. We have this ACE concept. So some of the things we heard from community members tonight really start to factor into this, the transportation, what is the culture of how you drive around in your district to get from one place to the other. Those mean something in your district. We did send a code for all of you that are on this committee. So if you would take the time now to text, use your cell phone, type that number in, and then the code word that should be at your place, I believe. And then I'll talk with Stacia to see if we're seeing people come in, but we will have some trial questions to make sure that technology is working tonight. So when you come in, I'm going to see what your name is. So I want you to just type your last name and we'll just see it pop up here. So Vicki's just Vicki.
It's on your, it's at your seat. There's a half sheet of paper. But it's the same one that Amy's showing you.
So this is progress as these names are coming in. If you remember last time, it was not working up on my screen, but it was working out in the digital world. I'll give it a couple minutes. I think we had a total of 21 on our panelists. You probably can see on your screen, you can see as the results are coming in, I believe. And now I'm seeing there's 11.
You have 15, I believe.
I think you said 15. Is that right, Vicki?
Yep. Yes.
Three more away. And again, for those that are listening in on this, this is one of those necessary evils with our technology to make sure everything's working and we can get the right amount of response from everybody that's on the committee and factored into the next steps. So I'm just going to do kind of a looking at my watch for about another 30 seconds, and then I'm going to move. And if you're struggling, if you just go to Vicky, she might be able to assist you. Sometimes people with your cell coverage, you maybe just can't get in. I'll give everyone about 10 seconds. We will move on. All right, so the first thing I wanted to start out, just to get a sense from everybody, is do you understand that boundaries have to change? So
Hey,
go
Rob,
ahead.
so I only saw 13, and I really don't want people left out. So is anybody, I'm sorry, what? Oh, okay, so you, okay. Okay, but that name wasn't on there? Okay. Okay, well, let's try this one and see if we get all 15.
Perfect. So want to understand where you are in this process. So you understand that boundaries have to change. So yes is A, no is B. A return if it's yes, B return if it's no. So you can see I have 12 results, 13. 14. I'm just going to do a countdown because, again, I don't want us to be belabored on things. We do want your inputs, but 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right, so 100% of you voted for that. All right, so now as we move into, if you remember, we had guiding principles. So the board, when we met with them, they gave us some guiding principles. These are important as we get into the concepts. Make sure you go back to this page and reference this as we look at how well we've established the groundwork with these guiding principles. We also had the board, they agreed to this timeline, the ACE concept, the boundary criteria, all of these things. That was, again, review. We had 10 criteria that we had the board look at and try to prioritize. Their prioritization came out with these 3 tiers. The number 1 vote that they had was to make sure that we have the enrollments and building utilization correct. So we don't have too many kids and we don't have too few kids. So just the right amount as it relates to the capacity. Then some other votes that we had were to make sure that we're not creating a plan that we have to build more things. It could be a new building, could be additions. They also wanted to keep the neighborhoods intact as best as possible. You guys live in the community, and some of these neighborhoods, they are almost like a patchwork of spaghetti, and so you don't necessarily know you're moving from one neighborhood to the other, but try to keep everything together. Some other votes were transportation considerations and then minimizing the students that would be impacted by the boundary change. You'll see as we work through this analysis, all the criteria are important, but this was the benchmark the board gave us, and that's what we're trying to work through as we evaluate each of the plans. So we had some different goals that you guys provided back on September 17th. We talked a little bit about where enrollment was going. We talked about how we broke it down at the level by building. And then I'm going to talk later about the capacity update, but we also put it here so you can understand that the earlier numbers are old numbers and we have new numbers. Secondary projections, so again, by building. We then had some concept developments of how we were going about trying to create what we presented to you last time. Remember, this was a starting point to understand where you all were at with how we could start to move things to address the guiding principles and the boundary criteria. We had different comments that came back from that, that kind of built on what we heard tonight from the four people, with where things were located, how it related to where things were in relation to the neighborhoods, what was changing, all these different things. I have no idea why on these slides that does that, but if I hit it twice, it shows. So we had different comments as well with concept 2. Ultimately, we had ACE that you guys bought into. We had future discussion, and that kind of got us to the point of, well, where do we go from here? So we presented you 2 concepts. You ultimately did not like concept 2. More of us liked concept 1. And so we took the comments that you provided from concept 1, and we started to dig in a little bit more. And so I'm going to talk about capacity. So we mentioned this in the first meeting. The amount of capacity that was available and the number of kids that were in your district for elementary students was basically about 99%. So when we look at that table on the bottom left, you can see what the old capacity was for each building. And at that time, it looked like we had just a little bit under 2,500 student capacity. Well, as I worked with Vicki, one of the things that was initially in that old capacity was, if a building is a 3-section building, meaning there would be 3 grades of kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, and so on, it was a 3-section building. Well, when she looked at the rooms, classrooms that were available in each of these buildings, if it was a 3-section building, we would need 18 classrooms to be able to be a K-5 building. And when she took out the rooms that were being used for some of the special programming, we came up with, let's say, 20 rooms. So it would be what we would call a 3+ building, meaning you would have 2 classrooms that could be available right now and are being used right now as core classrooms for K-5 instruction. So the new capacity took those available spaces that were not being used for the special programming need and added that into the capacity. So that's why we can see with Seth Payne, it grew from 396 to 470, from Isaac Fox from 528 to 592. New May Whitney went from 660 to 713. Sarah Adams went from 396 to 449. And then Spencer Loomis went from 503, it dropped a little bit, to 495. So we went from a total elementary capacity of 2,483 students to 2,719. Now, one thing that I wanted, and I put up here as a note, a caution when we have these bubble classrooms. And one of the things that I know Vicki in our conversations had was, let's say it's a 3-section building, and we now have these 2 bubble flex spaces, and we get a 4th section of kindergarten. Then the next year they roll up to 1st grade and we need a 4th section. Well, if they roll the following year after that up and they need a 4th section, well, we're not going to have a room that's available for them. So that became part of our discussion, that yes, our capacity went up and this is a true capacity, but we want everyone to be aware, and probably more for administration, that these bubble classrooms will not make it that you jump from 3 sections to a 4-section building or a 4-section building to a 5-section building. So that's kind of capacity 101, some changes that were made. This was huge in Brandon and I to look at what comments you provided last time and how does that then relate to what we can do with the boundaries moving forward. So that's capacity. That's a huge thing. So the way we're going to work through tonight is I'm going to present one of the elementary concepts. We'll give you some time for discussion. Our technology is working, and so even while you're looking at this concept, you'll be able to type in responses of what you're thinking. But I want to give an introduction to 1A. So some of the things that we heard really loud and clear from the committee last time was an element of transportation. So when we were looking at the southwest part of the district, south of 22, we knew that that was going to be problematic to still continue to move them north, whether it was North Middle School or one of the northern elementary buildings. So what we ended up doing is all these bullet points that you see in this particular instance. The table that's on the bottom and that is also on the map is going to give you the projections for the enrollment as it relates to in 2021. I believe that's what it would be currently if everybody was going to school based on our projections from last year. But then as we go from 21-22 through 24-25, it's going to be reflected by the solid color on the map. So you'll be able to see what those enrollments could be with this proposed option. You also will be able to see what the old capacity was as we continue to move to the right on that table, and then what the new capacity is. Then as we move to the right, you can see how that new capacity relates to the number of students in each of those projected years from 2021 through 24-25. Then the last column, the FRO, that's free and reduced lunch. And so we're showing you with this option, how does that relate with the current students from the 1920 data that we're looking at when they're reassigned to this proposed option? What would that free and reduced lunch number look like for each of these attendance areas with this proposed option? So this is the table. This is some of the elements that went into option 1A. Then here is the map itself. At each of your tables, you're going to be able to have this larger, I believe 11:17. So you're going to see that same table with projections. We didn't put all the capacity numbers on that just because it didn't fit nicely, would be too small. But what we did add on each of the maps, there's letters, and then the table below the projections, we've created a general place name for that region. So for instance, place A, you can see my cursor, I think you can up on my presentation where A is, we've named that generally the Meadowwood Townhomes. You can see that it currently is in Spencer Loomis, and in this proposed option, it goes to Seth Prairie. So we recommend that we give general place names. We know some of the areas, particularly when I get down to A, where we've called it the Hidden Valley of Killdeer, there's other neighborhoods that are tied into that. So look at the black and green lines that go around it, and you get a sense of what's moving, again, going back to this table, in this case from Isaac Fox into May Whitney. And so you can see a lot of the balances that came in play. One of the things that was very helpful for us with this capacity was we didn't have to change anything with Sarah Adams. And that allowed us to do some different things because we're so tight with the capacity there. We could keep, in this case, we could keep Sarah Adams the same as it was before. So I'm going to give you some time to look through this. I'm going to pull down my chat thing. So if any of you, as you're going through this, you have some specific questions, I'll try to look at the chats or the question answers thing and try to respond. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to look this over. I'll see where you're at. Then I'll advance to the slide where we can start to get your input. What do you think about this concept? Please go back to any page that you have referenced with the boundary criteria or the guiding principles. That's how we want to kind of benchmark. Are we making progress toward what the board gave us as an objective? So go, I'm going to hit my clock for 5 minutes and see where you guys are at.
So Rob, you're asking us to look at the boundaries and just, but if you have any questions of, when you're not familiar with the areas or something, I think we could help you with that too. Natasha?
I have a quick question, and it's more about capacity, not the boundaries, and
Sure.
how you guys came to that number. I heard you speak to like 4-section, 3-section classrooms. But I'm thinking about in an elementary building, you also have like the band room, the ESL rooms, the extended math. Were those also taken into consideration when you were thinking about the capacity of
Yes.
a building?
Yeah, and they were taken out the last time.
Okay.
And they're still taken out. So
Great. I
thank
just
you for
wanted
the
to make
question.
sure,
Yep.
looking at percentages.
And that's different for different buildings because some have dedicated spaces and some use traditional classrooms for, some have a dedicated band room, so it's not out of the classroom count. There's other buildings that use a classroom for band, so you can't include that as a general classroom. So it depends on the building. I also, I know he had a note about the general names. Those names were tied into their system. So for example, D mentions the Sanctuary Club, but if you look at the map, it's really the Sanctuary Club and Forest Lake. So don't strictly rely on their designation because as they said, that's kind of one name for the whole area and some of them encompass more than one. So as you're looking, if you need any help or clarification about areas, Leslie and myself are familiar with most of with the district, so we certainly could help if that's a concern of yours.
All right, just to take a survey of the room, that was 5 minutes. Is there some questions? May open up to some questions as you're digging into this information.
So Dr. Galt had a question, and so I'll direct this to Leslie. So how many students are shifted from walkers to bus riders, if any? In this map 1A. A little closer, Leslie.
I just want to make sure that everybody hears that, because that did come to my mind, and it did because at the board meeting, there were at least 1 or 2 board members who were interested in that, so.
Yes. These 5 changes would not result in bus riders becoming walkers or walkers becoming bus riders.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question about
Yes.
this map. I know our target capacity is 93%. With such a small change happening at Isaac Fox, just that one neighborhood, which I know also has big lots, so the population of kids is not that big. Do you know what the percentage difference would be if that neighborhood were to stay at Isaac Fox versus switching to May Whitney?
Let me get a clarifying question. Which area are you referencing again?
I'm talking about section E that is moving from Isaac Fox to May Whitney.
I don't have the specific numbers of what that results. As far as, is it 15 kids? Is it 20 kids? We do know it's enough to get us at that 93%, which was kind of the goal that we've set, so we have flexibility in those bubble years where there might be some larger grades versus some of the normal class sizes that come through.
And taking into account just trying to keep kids at home schools as much as possible, was it taken into account that Isaac Fox is attached to Middle School South? So if for any reason there are bubble years, that's a school that could handle it, and then we would be able to keep those kids at that school.
Yeah, let me answer that, and Vicki may chime in. We really don't have space at the middle school. When you start seeing these larger grades move their way into north and south, we've been able to utilize some of the space in the middle school, but as these larger grades work their way into the middle school, those rooms are going to have to be utilized for middle school programming. So it's not something that we can rely on. It's been a short-term blessing to address some of the capacity need, though.
Robert, would it be fair to say that the impact of Hidden Valley of Killdeer would be about 30 students? If I look at the elementary projections compared to what you have in the projections on option A, 1A, just math-wise, 30.
It could be, as long as we're only moving one thing out and nothing in, and we reference what's in the enrollment projections, it's going to be pretty close.
Okay. And then I do have another question on the Hidden Valley of Killdeer. As you come down Quinton traveling south, there's a cutout that goes east and picks up 3 roads, Bosham, High Knoll, and then Hidden Valley Drive. Quite frankly, I can't tell you anything about High Knoll other than I thought it was a dead end and it was maybe one family that lived back in there. But on Bosham, obviously Bosham goes into that neighborhood that's in Isaac Fox. And if you drive Bosham, it's probably 9 or 10 homes that by cutting them off would, you know, it doesn't, I don't know that it makes sense to move Bosham with that cutout that you have there in the southeast corner.
Right, and make a note of that when we go to the comment section. You said Bosham Road.
And so, I mean, that's neighborhood centric. And the other piece of it is over in the southwest corner for Seth Payne, bottom southwest corner of Seth Payne. It looks like maybe 2 roads, Arboretum, and I'm not sure if it's Caitlin Way. But would it make sense to just draw a straight line across and pick up those two roads and move them into Isaac Fox to keep it neighborhood centric?
Chris, where are you speaking of?
Literally the bottom cut out of the pink.
Oh,
Just-
it's,
There's just two roads there, I think. Yeah, well, yeah, you're south of 22.
along Rainbow Road. What? That's what I was looking to see. It follows the current boundary.
Looks weird.
Yeah, so Chris, that follows the current boundary.
Oh, it does? Okay.
So that little, because the road kind of goes up
Got it.
and goes onto Rainbow Road. So even though the boundary dips down, kind of the access is
Got it.
there. So that portion does follow the current boundary.
Perfect. Never mind then.
You guys see my laser pointer?
Yep,
Yeah,
This is the area you're talking about.
yeah.
yes.
So I just have two quick questions, kind of echoing what Chris said with that Bosham, the fact that that road extends, so you are cutting off halfway through a neighborhood. And then my other 2 cents was looking at this northeast. It's the, I think you put the sanctuary, which is also Fox Lake. I didn't drive that today. I drove a bunch of other ones, but when you take it, I'm assuming the quickest right now that the schools do is straight up Old McHenry. And if they had to come down and out, it would be a better transportation, but I'm assuming we'd pick them up, go all the way down North Quinton to 22, and then to the May Whitney. And how much more time is that going to tack on? Distance-wise, it looks similar, but I think just Old McHenry is just that quicker route. So, but overall, I do like this general setup better than the other ones that were suggested.
I'd just like to add something, again, reiterate what they've said. Is there a reason why we didn't choose to use Quinton Road to make that divide so that we could put those few streets? Dissecting a street in the center is never really nice when one child lives next door to another and they're not going to the same school. When I think keeping with one of the guiding principles was the main arteries, using that to divide that area would address that, as well as on this, almost in the middle of the page, you have the blue, the dotted lines, and then the yellow, right where it's on the page, it reads Kemper Lake Golf Club. Can we take that natural line that would exist there at Old McHenry Road? Right now, that blue that's just to the south of Old McHenry Road, I believe is a subdivision that will not have school-age children in it, so it would just look more aesthetically pleasing, I guess would be the answer. And with A, I would like to just note one thing, that small sliver that's there that currently goes to Spencer Loomis, you have it listed as Meadowwood Townhomes. That can only be accessed both in and out via Route 12 in a northern travel pattern. So putting the students on the bus in that location, the next time that bus would have to actually physically turn around and go back to the school that it looks on a map relatively close to would happen once you get to Old McHenry, and then you're passing another elementary school. So I think that's why originally it was kept at Spencer Loomis, because then you could leave that Bailey and Arcadia area and then head up to Valentine Manor, pick those students up because they have that same restriction of only being traveling north, and then head down Old McHenry and take them into Spencer Loomis. So otherwise, I think many of these other items look very doable.
But it is conceivable that Meadowwood Terrace or townhomes could go with Timberlake and Windstone. You'd take a right up Route 12, take a left at Timberlake, take a right out, and go south down Windstone. So it probably works either way.
It does work that way. It just getting enough time to make that maneuver northbound, cross over to, there is a good turn lane, and then we'd cross 3 lanes of traffic to get into. So just making that right opportune moment. Yep.
Okay.
But yes, it would work.
So go ahead, Rob.
All right, so I've advanced this for you to put some of this narration, enter that into your cell phone, hit return. Now, as you're doing that, I want to just kind of always bring us back to why we're doing this, right? We have too many kids at Spencer Loomis. We have a brand new elementary, new May Whitney, that's going to be opening for the 21-22 school year. So we also had goals of trying to get the capacity utilization at roughly 93% or lower. So when we look at this plan and we're looking at as we go out to 24, 25, you can see these buildings are right at or just below 93%. So if we go to our first criteria, which is projected enrollment, building utilization, we should be saying this is probably a check. This meets initially what we think is required for enrollments and utilization. Then as you start to work your way through this, some of the comments you've made, these are great things to interject into this process with Area A, this Meadowwood Townhomes. Hey, if you can only during the busy time turn to go north, coming out of there in the morning, that could be problematic, right? So that's something for us as a group to think about, that maybe that would be better to stay with Spencer Loomis. Some of our challenges, I'm not from there, but just looking at all of the data, when we talk about neighborhoods with these large lots, we take big chunks. And you're going to see some differences as we move through options 1B and 1C. So please type in some of these responses you have. They're great. That's why you're on the committee. You guys are the experts, the people listening in on this. They may be thinking these very same things. So nothing's bad. Just put those things in there. So this is a way we can collect your opinion and not actually be in Lake Zurich.
So Rob, just to clarify or remind ourselves, so we know that the active construction we have right now is in the north part of district, predominantly in the Spencer Loomis attendance area. So you've accounted for that growth in your future projections, correct?
Absolutely. So we have, just so everyone knows that maybe didn't listen the first meeting, we have what we call a building permit allocation model that's based on information that we receive from the villages, where infrastructure is, how it's related to each of these villages. And so we understand what is going to be built in these areas, or in areas that there's active construction, what's happening there. And we have a model that then's saying, hey, there's going to generally be, let's say, 1 kindergartner for every one of these 5 homes or 10 homes. So absolutely put that in. And that's part of the reason that we know we have to move some of the students that are currently at Spencer Loomis to other buildings. A good question. If there's other questions as you're typing this stuff in, that this is good. And I realize any plan that we make, I'll probably say this multiple times. Last time we just kind of threw some things out to start the conversation to understand, what are those elements that you, the experts that live in this community, you have kids in each of these buildings, how then do we start to move areas that's going to address all the things that the district and the board are concerned with? And that's why I started with that first question. Do we understand we have to move boundaries? And all of you that are on the committee agree we're going to have to move boundaries. It's just which of those boundaries. And you're going to see between these 3 options, there's not really much difference that we can do beyond what we're going to show you tonight. That's good and bad. And we've hopefully provided something where you can see it's not just one area that gets moved, it's different areas. So I'm going to take about 30 seconds for those that are still typing their things in, and then we'll move to our next slide. And so we're going to end up moving to option 1B. Actually, there might be one more question after this. All right, I'm going to do a countdown of 10 seconds. I got all these Zoom things up, so I'm going to move over to see if anyone's flagging me that they're still typing. I'm going to do a countdown of 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, so again, trying to bring you back to the guiding principles, the boundary criteria, the ACE concept. How well do you feel this option is moving us? I'm not saying this is the option that moves to the public inputs, but how do you feel this rates? Is it meeting those criteria? Is it more right than wrong? Is it more wrong than right? And try not to think about if you're in a area that's moving, you probably think it doesn't meet it, but think about this from the district perspective of we're having to move some boundaries to have the right space in these buildings. I got 9 results. Try to make sure at least we get 13 because I've been seeing 13 registered on those ones. So I'm gonna do a countdown again of 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, so option 1B, this again is going to be set up as well, similar to 1A, but there's some differences in what we did on the map. And so again, when I just give you a highlight, when we look at the table that'll be on your 11 by 17 map, you can see we do a pretty good job. There's a little more at Sarah Adams than what we had in the previous option. The free and reduced lunch, you can see that breakdown. Going to be similar to what we have for 1A. We'll have some comparison charts that come later. Here's the visual. Again, each of these place names. Again, look at the map because it's going to capture likely more than what some of these areas as we've given for a general name. So you'll see what's moving, where it was, and where it's being proposed to move. And so I'm going to set my timer again for 5 minutes. I'll try again. I see there's some other questions. I'm going to try to answer those while you guys are at work. But go on option 1B.
Okay.
All right, I'm at that 5 minutes. How is everyone feeling about this? Are you ready to do kind of a report outs? General comments? I see some thumbs from Kelly. Hey, anytime you can do the thumbs up, that's good for me. Because you might be saying yes, but I can't see it through your mask.
Mine's yes. I had a question, my same question that I asked earlier. So I'm going to pose it to Leslie again. Can you speak to bus riders and walkers again, please?
Yes, in this model that we have here, section C, which is leaving the May Whitney boundary and moving over to Sarah Adams, it's called Hunter's Creek. Currently right there are 100 school-age students that are there. 43 of those will now become walkers rather than school bus riders to Sarah Adams. Correct. Currently, they're school bus riders to May Whitney.
Just a couple thoughts from me. I'll start with the Hidden Valley of Killdeer and the east of Quinton Road. It's similar to option A that we just talked about. I wonder in the Acorn Acres or Region A, to the point that was made on the first option, that little cutout in the off of 12 there that only has the ability to travel north. I wonder if it makes sense to cut that line off there and allow that to go to Spencer Loomis and then come over on the southeast corner and pick up, I'll call it Echo Lake, west of Echo Lake Road. To me, if the bus situation is a big deal coming out of that one neighborhood, push that into Spencer Loomis and then pick up west of Echo Lake, that little blue cutout there that currently is scheduled to go to Spencer Loomis.
I agree. It was the first thing I noticed, that in that neighborhood in section A, that top corner, the top north corner that's cut out is extremely close to Spencer Loomis. And then they would be switched to Seth Payne. And I know that that would be probably a major frustration for a lot of parents for a variety of reasons. I also, knowing the Old Mill Grove Hunter's Creek kind of area, that Hunter's Creek is basically the same as Chestnut Corners, and it would be similar to dividing a neighborhood. It would be kids' backyards being in different schools, backyard neighbors being in different schools. So that might be a difficult transition. And I have to mention again, for my Isaac Fox family out there, I still would really like to see what difference number-wise it would make to take Hidden Valley, Pine Circle out, again, because it is such a small group that would be switching to May Whitney, which I think the social, emotional cost when it's such a small population of students moving to school could be very difficult, because it could be one student in an entire grade level switching to a different school. And it is important that we take into account that it is a pandemic, and we would be asking this very small group of students to switch after a year of being at home. So I think we have to really be careful with that situation.
Again, you can type these in. It looks like just doing some quick math with what's the current boundaries, and then with the Isaac Fox change for this area D, it's about 30 to 40 students in any given year. So, and just for everyone to have reference to, a lot of these places that we're moving, there are going to be maybe 10 students, 20 students, 30 elementary students. We're not moving large chunks in any of these places for the most part. So some of the things that have been mentioned with the pandemic, I think it's probably relative to every area that's moving, to be honest, because there's not places where we have hundreds of kids that are located in some of these areas. But definitely something that should be considered. You can type in your texts up here for what your thoughts are on 1B. And you can disagree with the comments I had. I'm just here trying to help everyone kind of think through that we're having to move the boundaries, and in order to get buildings where we're at that 93%, it's going to be challenging. One thing I also wanted to make note through some of the things that we've read, you're opening a brand new state-of-the-art facility. So if there's any building, I mean, all of your buildings are nice, but to have a brand new building, I would think we would likely see what we see in other districts where people want to move and be in that building if you meet the parameters of, is it a neighborhood area, how far away it is. So I think it's exciting with that new building opening up.
Looking at section A, I could kind of see it going both ways. I mean, when you look at, there's part of that section A that's actually a lot closer to Spencer Loomis than to, I'm sorry, a lot closer to Seth Payne than to Spencer Loomis. I mean, you literally drive, you're literally driving past Spencer, I'm sorry, you're literally driving past Seth Payne, depending on which side of that neighborhood you live in. So I totally empathize with it being a pandemic and kids potentially having to move, and I don't know if Dr. Galt, you could speak to what the grandfather options might even be if someone's really upset about that. But depending on where you live in that neighborhood, it would probably be better. Would that also change walkers? Because it'd be, or is that considered a busy road right there next to Seth Payne? If you're coming from, like, you know, Bruce Circle or one of those houses back there.
I don't believe they would walk because there's no sidewalks and the road is relatively narrow. But you're right, the houses that are right above that green and black hash line, their backyard, if there wasn't a creek there, it would be the back of Seth Payne. So it's very close. I mean, there's not that much distance between Seth Payne and Spencer Loomis, you know, to begin with. So you do kind of get that pinch of neighborhoods being right between them. In terms of, well, Kelly, would you like to speak to that? Go ahead.
So in terms of your grandfathering question, I think that, that's something that we would do at the end, and we'd have conversations about that, and the board would have to help us direct any of that information, but it really and truly would be in many ways based on our ability to continue to be at a certain capacity. So we'd have to agree that we weren't going to go beyond a certain capacity in order to make that happen. In previous districts I've been in, we've been able to grandfather when space was not an issue, and typically the grade levels you look at are 5th and 8th for natural reasons. But most of the time you don't look outside of that unless you have a lot of space, which we're in a situation right now where we don't have a lot of space. So not that I would want to promise anything, but those are typically the grade levels that you would be talking about.
And is that a one-off family, or is that a community? Like, for instance, if you just looked at region D, would you say the whole region, or would you look family to family? Because for instance, if I was in region D and I said, hey, I want to go to Isaac Fox, could I get grandfathered in? And my neighbor wants to go to May Whitney. Is that how you look at it?
You know what? I really can't hear you. Is your microphone on?
It is.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry, no, it's my fault. So if I was in region D and I decided I wanted to try to be grandfathered in, do you look at that individual family to individual family, or you wouldn't look at it as a whole region and say, hey, all D is coming to Isaac Fox, we'll grandfather them in for now?
I would have to defer to Vicki to see what they've done here in the past, because I don't know the process that's been followed in the past here, but so I'll let her speak first.
So I believe typically, you move the neighborhoods and then someone requests to remain. So it is on a case-by-case basis.
That's how
The other component is whether we could provide transportation for those families that would be grandfathered would be something else we'd have to look at. I can't say one way or the other. It maybe depends on how many neighborhoods, how many kids, those types of things. Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm going to close this out with your comments. I think we've captured what I've been hearing through the audio portion of this. And we'll go to the same question. All right, opening up again with option 1B, how well this aligns with the guiding principles, boundary criteria, and ACE. All right, a little bit mixed on it, so I'll close this out here in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so now 1C. So when our team was looking at this, we were seeing that area that's up by the Kemper Lakes Golf Club. And again, an area that we were naturally moving from Spencer Loomis to May Whitney. We're like, well, what if we kept those students at Spencer Loomis? What could we do? So that became the catalyst of trying to look at this differently than the ways we were looking at it with option 1A and 1B. And so you'll see the numbers. You're going to see that Spencer Loomis were right up at their capacity, and particularly as we get out to 24, 25, you see we're with that new capacity over 100%. So it doesn't meet our objective there, but we thought it was relative to look at this because you really start to get a sense of how in 1A, 1B, we make some small changes, but when we get to 1C, in order to get the buildings close to that 93%, we really make a lot of change. So it may look kind of nice with the solid colors, particularly between Spencer Loomis and Seth Payne. But look where Seth Payne's boundary is, right up and around Spencer Loomis. So again, we don't really hit the capacity on this the way we would like to see it. But again, you see these general regions that are moving. I'll give you 5 minutes as well to talk about this. And the other thing that probably stands out is south of Rand Road. We moved that area from Seth Payne into May Whitney. And again, it was just all about, since Seth Payne had to take so much around Spencer Loomis, they had too many kids. And so then how do we start to get their enrollment down towards that 92% that we needed? So I'm going to give you another 5 minutes and we'll see where you guys are at with 1C.
Rob, do you have like a disruption number, for lack of maybe a better way of saying it? Like, like this one impacts, 100 students or 100 families, I don't know how you, and then this one, does 150. Is that?
Yes, absolutely. When we get through each of these elementary options, I think we have a slide where we hone in on comparisons of the free and reduced lunch, and then what it would mean in our terminology, students impacted by the boundary change.
Thank you.
Okay, the last 15, 20 seconds are ticking off my timer. I'm going to open up the questions for your general feedback as you're finishing your thoughts, looking at your map, looking at your tables.
So Leslie, since Dr. Galt stepped out, I'll ask her question. Does this shift any of our walkers or bussers?
No, this does not.
Thank you.
I would just offer a piece of general feedback from a student services perspective. We know that we're going to impact a pocket of families and students one way or another. So I just think that it's important on our end as a district to be prepared to orient new students, to acclimate them, get them connected with new peers, get families integrated. So just thinking about how we can be proactive with some of those social emotional supports through the transition, I think will be really important.
I just had a quick question. I don't know if transportation, Leslie, if you might be able to answer it. Looking at C, it does look like that is like the orchard. I know you kind of divides off two ways. I don't know what the buses are there. Would it make sense to just take that whole little section, so everything west of C, so the divide would be at 22, and have all of them go to May Whitney? Because again, I don't know if you're already sending a bus down that way anyway, so you just pick them all up, as opposed to having two separate buses go down that way.
Yes, currently we have section C, and the section that's just to the left of it on your page are on one bus. This split like this between C and then the pink would then cause a second bus to need to be added just for coverage in this area. Because most of this area down here is the Jewel, the Target, you know, those children would be the only children in that quadrant that would go on the school bus. So yes, that is problematic.
So yeah, so then the concern is just, can we, if we're gonna move that small section of C, can we expand that west and let 22 be that divide? And then send those kids to May Whitney, so at least they're all together. And then thinking of the, this subject of with the West Cuba and section D, can we then divide that at North Quinton and have that smaller section on that southeast side go back to Spencer Loomis, because now we've moved kids, I'm sorry, not Spencer Loomis, Isaac Fox. So now we put more kids into May Whitney, so can we kind of shift those two sections? So that way neighborhoods are more staying together, if that makes sense.
Those shifts are not equal though. One thing, this is a highly populated area, C, is not equal to those few roads that are there.
What I'm hearing being said is, if you can minimize bus routes in an area, this particular plan, you add another bus route. So in order for this to work, you would need this to expand and take all of the area south of 22 that's in set pane. That's what I'm hearing. Does that sound about right?
Yes, currently they share a route, so splitting them would add an additional route to there.
Overall, for me, I think option 1C is it's just too much change. And I think the impact to the students would be just too much. Now, I do like the concept of C moving west to the boundary and using 22 as your natural northern, your boundary into May Whitney. I think that makes a lot of sense. And it can pull kids there and probably does look at that region D as an option to shift back into Isaac Fox, not knowing the head count that it impacts.
One thing I would like to point out in this document that's so different from, let's see where it's C. So A and B were different, and I did like the fact that Forest Lake and Sanctuary were being moved out of Spencer Loomis and moved to May Whitney. It's just closer rather than those kids spending 9 years traveling back and forth on Old McHenry on the longest bus ride. I did like that for a couple years they got to spend some time with May Whitney, which is much closer. So I did think that this kind of did a disservice that we really liked in one A and B. And then again, the Quinton Road issue.
And then as I pull out, like, so if we talk about D, that gets Isaac Fox back to what their original boundary is. So I look at the projections for this area, you would see for reside would be between 570 and 590 students over the next 4 years. So that's, when we look at their capacity of 592, we really have a limit on what that available capacity is. It would be really tight, some years more than others.
So you were addressing if section D remained at Isaac Fox? Is
Correct.
that what you're responding to?
Correct.
And one additional mention that I want to mention, when you have the area that's boldly marked West Milton Road, and then you also have North Trail. North Trail is a continuation road. It comes in off of Old McHenry and continues through, so you are segmenting a street there rather than even, it's a complete neighborhood, so it is dissected there. Underneath the word North Trail, you'd see a line that is the street that comes all the way down through.
So if you don't know where she was describing, it's that very northern boundary between, the new boundary between Seth Payne and Spencer Loomis, that vertical green and black line where it says North Trail.
All right, I'm going to close this out and go to the question again. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, same question. How does this meet the boundary criteria, guiding principles, ACE? All right, I'll close this in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. These next two slides will kind of surmise some of the information that is inherently happening. So I'm going to show you free and reduced lunch. So if we look at this table, you'll see what it currently is with the 1920 based on those boundaries for each of the buildings. You can see what it would be for option 1A, 1B, and 1C. Now, this is not in your, actually this one is in your PowerPoint that you guys received. One of the things that started to jump out is with 1C, we basically maintain a similar FRL percent as what we had currently. That probably is one of the strengths of this. Now, when we're talking about going from 9% to 5%, we're not talking about a lot of students when you have 400, 500 kids, right? So 4% change is not a lot. So this is the breakdown of what that would be with the 1920 data. And then as we associate that with each of these options. We then, this afternoon, put together this SIBC, so students that are impacted by the boundary change. And you're going to see for option 1A, 1B, and 1C. The way this works is when we're on the left-hand column, this is where they are residing for the current boundary, and then where is those students going with the changes proposed in each of the options. This is only K through 3 because we're using 1920 data. We don't yet have official 2021 data. With the 2021 data, we would look at K through 4. So the number of students that are going to be impacted will increase. This is not in your presentation. We didn't have it ready for submittal for you guys to be able to have this printed out. What clearly stands out in 1A, when we're looking at this K through 3 population, 1A and 1C are very similar in the students that are impacted. 1B, a lot more students impacted. So again, just another way to look. We weren't asked to have this as one of the top criteria, but one board member, I believe, voted that this was something that they wanted to see as a part of how they would look at the final product. So again, we have the data based on what we received from the district. So what I'd like to do is get your vote on what option, as it was presented, not with any potential changes that you provided as comments, but where do you align? Which one of these options is the best option that would hit more of the guiding principles, the boundary criteria, and that ACE concept? Don't you wish the national election would be like this as everybody voted? Pretty crazy.
Maybe someday it will be. We'll just sit at our phones.
All right, we have the 13 responses we've been regularly getting. So kind of a mixed bag on 1A, 1B. Probably depends on what your thoughts are to it. I want to come to this question. So which options would you like seen presented with the public inputs that are slated tentatively in October? I'm going to check with the person behind my door here to make sure. I think you can answer twice. All right. You can answer at least 3 times. If you want all 3 options, you can hit A, return, B, return, C, return. But I know you guys are up in Chicago, but you can't go A, return, A, return, A, return, right? It's only going to take 1 response per answer, per option. So since I'm giving you the ability to provide multiple answers, it's almost what you guys were saying on the previous slide. So I'm going to do a countdown of 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, we're going to be able to move through the middle schools, I think, a little bit quicker, because basically we either keep the boundary or we tweak it just a little bit. So let me give you a little background. When we were looking at the middle school boundaries and looking at what the available capacity is, we have about 1,400 students when we get out to 24, 25, and our capacity is just a little over 1,400 students. This is why we're saying, yes, Isaac and Spencer, they can utilize the middle school right now for space, but that's something we can't be planning on because the larger classes, as they move into those spaces, we're not going to have that flexibility. So clearly, North Middle is larger than South Middle. We're trying to look at, is there a way to try to get more of a complete feeder? Just not possible with where the buildings are located, how we create those attendance areas. And so as Brandon and I were looking at this is why we have only 2 options for the middle school. One that's going to be where we have the current boundary, or one, in this case, I believe with 1A, we changed the boundary a little bit for the middle school to try to get a little bit better utilization between the two buildings. And so I would recommend you pull each of these middle school maps out, because for 1B and 1C, that's the same boundary for both of them for the middle school. And so when we look at 1A, the only area that we changed was what comes up to the railroad and then down Old Range Road. We pulled that in, really just to kind of clean up a little bit of what we see here. And it changed enough with students to make it a little bit difference. We initially, just so you have some background, we initially, from the conversation that we had at the last meeting, we really were trying to look at, is there a way that we pull things south at 22? Because I heard a lot of that. Is there a way that we could try to create a south boundary that would be 22 and then come up Middleton Road through here? We just like kind of have something that is nice and clean. Well, the building is not large enough, so we can't do that. So if we were to move something over here, we'd have to start moving something over here. And we're like, gosh, we're already making a lot of changes, small changes, but impacting many different buildings at the elementary level. How much change should we really be doing at the middle school, knowing we're basically at capacity? So one of the philosophies we've always tried to adhere to when we're putting together plans, whether it's at the elementary or middle school level, is if the capacity is constrained in both of these middle school buildings, what would be another reason to change it differently from what we already have? And we just couldn't see how you'd be able to crack that nut to get something that is really much better than what you currently have. That's just our feedback. You guys may have some different thoughts on it. It seems like we have about the right number of kids moving into each of these buildings.
So to clarify, Rob, you looked at trying to put 3 of the elementaries into one building and 2 of the other, and there's not enough capacity. So then under these scenarios, all of Spencer Loomis, all of Seth Payne go to north, all of Isaac Fox, all of Sarah Adams go to south. So it continues the practice of dividing May Whitney. It's simply a matter of if there's any shift in that dividing line. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just going to give you a couple minutes to look at this. Obviously, you're probably not needing 5 minutes because we're just talking about one area, and you just need to look at what the differences are. And basically, as I'm looking at this, we're only looking at about like 5 students change from the current to what's being proposed. So it's very little change, 5 to 10 students in any given year. That's shifting from the north to the south. What I'm going to do is, I know this says option 1A, general feedback. What I want you to do here, because I think initially I set this up that would go through option 1A, you put your comments of what you like, then we show the 1B, 1C middle school, and you provide your feedback. What I think is probably, we don't need to do that because we're just moving one small area. And so what I'd like for you to do on this general feedback is put what is compelling about changing the boundary at the middle school level versus keeping it the same. Is there a compelling reason why we should do that? Or is it just let the chips be where they are with the current boundary that's in play? keep it the same.
Yeah, Leslie, I just have a quick question as far as transportation. Would this, for looking at that section A, would this significantly cut their travel time down from north to south if they were to switch?
I'm sorry,
Like
which,
as far as how long they're on the bus for this middle school option 1A, with that A section that we're looking at changing, would this significant, something in middle schoolers waking up super early, would this significantly cut down their bus travel time if we move them down to the south versus how they're currently at north?
I don't believe so, because there's not, that wouldn't be a bus all by itself, because there's only less than a handful of students there. They would have to loop in with the neighborhood that's adjacent to them. So I don't think their travel time would necessarily change one way or the other, because we'd still have to find another route to absorb them. Mhm.
Right, I'm seeing more people looking up. I'll close this out in 10 seconds. So 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so good comments. I'm going to move past this slide. I don't think this is relevant. Does everybody kind of agree? Can I have like a thumbs up? Don't need to vote on this. Okay. So then we had the 1B, 1C, so we had that. We don't need the feedback here. Don't need that same thing. So here's what I want to know is, based on what you know today with the middle school, which is the one that best hits your guiding principles, boundary criteria, and ACE? Is it 1A or is it the 1B, 1C? And we have 13, so the majority liked 1B, 1C. That's that small change. This one, which one do you want to see that would go to the public community inputs? Ten results. Right, 14. All of you liked the 1B, 1C to go forward. Okay, so I think we've captured, but I always like to leave it where if there's some other thoughts or ideas that you have on any of these plans. So we've recorded as we went through elementary 1A, 1B, and 1C. But maybe as you went through this, there were some other things that you thought about that you thought would be important for us to consider in this analysis. And as I'm talking here, I'll kind of lead into where this goes from here. So if you have other ideas to any of them, just put like 1A, like elementary, and then type in your stuff so we know how that relates. What we're working with Kelly and Vicki on is what these public inputs can look like. And so I wish I could just say, hey, this is how it's going to be, and it may be similar to what you've experienced with public inputs, but obviously we have to deal with the whole COVID situation and how many people can actually be in a facility, and how we maybe normally did public inputs just don't really work so well in this COVID environment. So as we've been working with your committee and other committees here the last 3 or so months, we've been trying to figure out a way to get that public input. And so I'm going to move to some of these other slides. I'll come back to this if there's some things you guys want to talk about. So initially in our schedule, we had October 13th and 14th is where we'd have these public inputs. And then our next boundary meeting would be November 19th. And so typically what we do when we are right up to the next, the public inputs, we'll take what you guys have said moving forward, which I believe was elementary 1A and 1B, and then the middle school option 1B, 1C. We would add elements of what your comments were, because there were things that you inherently maybe didn't like about any of those options, or you listed off some things that were positives. We would attach that to the process of what that material looks like. We would even get into, I know some people mentioned some things with that townhome development that's on 12. So how that maybe could be looked at. We would give all that. We want to be transparent. This is kind of a journey. We started out with, hey, here's something that might work. We heard some things from you. Tonight we heard from some people that even supported what you all commented on at the last meeting. We made some changes to get things probably more in line with what the community might expect, knowing that Spencer Loomis has too many kids and May Whitney's coming online. So this is kind of the schedule. We utilize with one of our business partners is Thought Exchange. And so this is a way that we can put information out there, and the thoughts that take off where people start to support something like, hey, I like option 1B and I really like what it does for set pain. So whatever the comments are, people get to make comments on the comments that everybody's making. And so you get an understanding of what people are thinking. We have different things that are put in there with, I would say, demographics to know where do they live. So we can understand, hey, if you're in Spencer Loomis, what are your thoughts about the changes that are happening? The idea behind this is that the best things, the best ideas kind of roll to the top. And so I think it's really good with these points here. It's share, star, discover. So it's really bringing people up to speed with what you learned in meeting 1 and meeting 2. We also can offset things on this thought exchange where the maps can be up there. We can even record a video that might be a district introduction, a video of the meeting that we have that night. So I'm just giving you guys some ideas, things that we're exploring with what will work in your community, how it works with COVID. It's actually really kind of exciting to get a lot of this information out there in such a way that people can quickly get educated to where you all are here on October 1st. So here's kind of an example of a thought exchange that we ran with the Kansas City, Kansas School District. And so we have different languages. I mean, I think over 100 languages that this can be, that's automatic as you select it, but just background information. You put in what your thought is, so you share a thought, and then the thought goes out there and other people rate that thought. And so the higher the stars, almost like if you go to Open Table or when you're rating things on Yelp or whatnot, or Google, that's kind of how this works. So if it's a good idea, it's going to have a higher star rating. So it's just to give you an idea of how we try to put this stuff together. It allows us to have a lot of analytics that can come back to us as the committee and then move forward to the board on the relevance, the thoughts, the support that people have for one of these options or specific things that they maybe thought was a challenge. And so, hey, group, we got to look at this a little differently. Can have you do one more vote. I'm going to let Vicki close out, or Kelly, some thoughts that you guys have with our next steps moving forward.
Our intention originally was to have a community input session on October 13th and 14th. And, there was a question mark as to whether we felt confident enough that we had options to present to the community. The thing we have to remember is going on to community input is not, we have not presented them with two final options or a final option. It's an opportunity for them to provide feedback just like you did tonight. And then we would gather that together. Rob would compile it or organize it, and then we would come back together on the 19th of November to review that. And, you know, we're not limited to one meeting on November 19th. If we don't feel we have time in the schedule, and we did that purposefully, that if we feel that, you know, we need to do something else, we will have that opportunity. So the question I have to you is, do you feel, you know, confident enough or have enough promising feelings that we have something that we can bring to the community to start receiving feedback on? And then we could use that to, you know, reflect and possibly make adjustments. Because, you know, there's things that, you know, we're 15 people, and other people have different experiences and different perspectives. And so it's going to be useful to hear those too, and to help frame where we may end up and what we recommend to the board. So is there any objection to going ahead with a community input session on October 13th and 14th?
Would we be narrowing some of the options we discussed tonight down?
No, we would bring them. Well, Rob, you could answer that, please.
Yeah, I think with the way you voted, 1A, 1B elementary, and then 1BC middle school, and by default, you have the current boundary, right? So everything with the middle school goes forward, but only 1A, 1B at the elementary. Those meant more of the things that you felt more positive about, that it's moving in the direction the boundaries ultimately need to go. 1C elementary had basically everything was more negative.
I would say if we're narrowing and not presenting with 5 different things for them to give input on, and we are all on a similar page with how we're feeling at this point about those elementary options, then perhaps that is a good jumping off point for community feedback, in my opinion.
I guess I just have a quick question. Are 1A and 1B, are you going to change them or like modify them? So then when we meet as a next time with the community, we're trying to figure out what got changed and wrap our heads around it? Or are these the two that you'll be presenting to the community so we could be able to be really educated on these options?
Good question. So option 1A, 1B elementary, those would be what is presented for the community to provide feedback. We would provide the narration of your comments you made, things related to transportation with an area off of 12. As we go back to all of your comments, we'd say, hey, here's the things that the committee was thinking, and then we then apply whatever their input is from the 13th and 14th. Our team will look at this. Is there a way that we can make things better to address, again, all of the elements that we're looking at? And then when we come back, we'd integrate those ideas into changing potentially what 1A, 1B is. Or there may be something that goes in a different direction. I never kind of hone it in that it's going to be absolutely this or absolutely that, because once we get some of the people where they're actually being impacted and they have a different perspective on things, we may have something because they're experts of their community. It may lead us in a different direction. But still, we have to always focus those guiding principles, the boundary criteria, and that ACE concept.
So I am a big proponent of people saying yes or no, so I'm really sorry, but I have to hear the voice of the committee. So I'm going to put you all on the spot, and you're going to have to tell us if you're comfortable enough to proceed or not. And we will not have any hurt feelings. If we need to slow it down, we will slow it down. If you're comfortable, we'll move forward. But I need to hear from each of you.
It might be just show a thumbs up if you're like good for it.
Yes, I would like to say, I think obviously like communication for whatever reason is not getting as clearly out there as we would hope, just looking at a lot of these questions. I know Isaac Fox, PTO today, pushed this redistricting out, and it was partly like me telling the PTO, our community needs to know this. So I think we need to make sure that the community is more aware, because I'm looking at some of these comments and people are mentioning that they had no idea.
So yes, and we have tried to push it out.
Oh, I know.
For the, I can share just a little bit of information for the actual opportunity for folks to come in and give their feedback. We are going to be pushing out postcards to every single community member, regardless if they have children or not. If they have an address here, they're getting a postcard. So we may get people that come that don't have children, and then others that have younger children that aren't yet in our system, and then those who currently have students in our system. So that's one push that we're planning on. But yes, I agree with you 100%. I always ask to see approximately how many folks we have watching. We don't have a lot again this evening. However, we are recording tonight's meeting, and so that'll be another opportunity for people to watch and listen, and we'll push that out as well. But definitely, I mean, that event will definitely bring in more people too. So thank you for that feedback.
If I could just add too, that all of the principals did send that out in their newsletter over the weekend. So we are trying to push that out in addition to what was already sent out. So we're really trying to help get the word out too.
Along those lines, are the community members going to have like access to these options 1A and 1B? Like, it's going to be put online so that way they're coming in already educated on knowing what might be changing, or is this like when they come in on the 13th and 14th, the first time they're seeing it?
The last presentation was posted on the Boundary webpage, correct, Jean? So, you know, so that was there. So this one would be too, so they would see that. And, you know, one option we have with the thought exchange is it does not have to be limited to those 2 nights. We can leave it open for a period of time where people can go back after the second night and see what people added. So it's a nice tool that, you know, you're not limited to just who can be there, you know, at 7 o'clock on a, you know, Wednesday night. So while the COVID has created many challenges for us, and I think tonight went better than the last meeting. I hope you feel that way. You know, with some of the changes we made, you know, we're learning, and so this thought exchange is an opportunity for a lot of voices to be heard, and that will then, you know, you'll all have access to the same information. That we'll all have access to the same information. So that will be beneficial too.
And what I like about the thought exchange is that sometimes after people go to an event, then they talk to neighbors, and it just more conversation in the community is sparked. And then as long as we leave it open, I feel like we'll capture more people after the fact too. And that's important to me. I want to capture as many people as we can.
I guess let me clarify a little more, only because like tired mom with little kids, I love the board meetings, I really do. But to watch 2 hours, then you like skip ahead and you're like, oh, I missed the 2 minutes I wanted to know.
Right.
So my question is, are we, for us tired moms and dads at home, will there be like a link that says click here for option 1A so that they could zoom in and see it versus having to watch this whole video, pause it when he puts it up?
Yes.
Oh, it's not working. And I was going to call on you, so thanks, Mrs. Malik.
I guess you have to turn it on to talk into it. So when we have the finalized options from Rob, we can post those. I hope you've all seen the redistricting webpage that's out on our site. There's an icon available on every school site. It's on the front of every page. We really have pushed the information out. People just don't always read what we send out. So we will continue, we know that, and we know that we have to keep doing it repeatedly. as we get more information throughout this process, we will continue adding it to that web page, and it will have maps of the options so that people can zoom in and look at it. And then it will also have links to the thought exchange, widget or whatever they give me to put on the website so that it will be easily accessible right there. Okay?
So Jean, Rob's highlighting for you your work.
Thank you. So we'll continue. That's just a news item, Rob, but if you actually click on, if you close that, and on the left, under important links, on the fourth box there, redistricting, and that is the actual page. Your names are up there. If you didn't come to this page, we're all listed there. RSP is listed there. The meeting dates, the documents are there, and some FAQs. So we'll continue adding to that, and we'll try to make it as conspicuous as possible so that everybody can easily find it. Anybody who has suggestions is welcome to contact me as well.
Okay, we're going to then finalize plans to for October 13th and 14th, and do a campaign, a blitz to inform the public. So any other questions before we approve the minutes that was on the agenda at the beginning that I failed to, I skipped right over that in our, wanting to get to the meat of the meeting. So before I bring up
I had one more
Sure.
question. I'm sorry, and this is for both you and Rob. So, my question is, so when we move forward, I know that last time when we met, we talked about the two. I think there were two plans last time. So are those gone then, or are you bringing those back as one of those back that we talked about last time, so that the community has opportunities to really react and see the differences, or are we just bringing back the two from tonight?
We are planning to just bring the two from tonight. It's a journey. And so here we are with the committee. This is our landing point. The comment, this doesn't mean that what was presented at the last meeting, that it may not revert back to that. There very likely could be people that like an idea that might be similar to what we as a group have evolved to differently. And that's the value of this thought exchange. They still can provide those comments. If we bring more than what we currently are talking about bringing, it becomes overload, and people aren't going to be able to distinguish a lot of the differences. If they want to support something that's different than 1A or 1B elementary, they'll be able to provide that in that thought exchange experience.
I just wondered. I just wanted to make sure. I was confused. So thank you.
So any other questions for Rob before we do our last piece of business and then adjourn the meeting? Okay, so can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the October, what was the last date we were together? September 19th. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the September 19th Boundary Advisory Committee?
So moved.
Moved by Chris Blaylock, second.
Approved.
I'm sorry,
Right over here.
Katie Barr, second by Katie Barr. Oh, sorry. Sorry. We have to take a roll call vote, so please take the roll. Cynthia?
Christopher Blaylock,
Aye.
Vicki Cullinan,
Aye.
Natasha Daniger,
Aye.
Kelly Galt,
Yes.
Leslie Lauritsen, Amy Marr,
Yes.
Jean Malik,
Yes.
Kathy Malloy,
Yes.
Lauren McCardle, Erna Messick, Kristen Paul,
Yes.
Angela Stallion,
Yes.
Apaji Vala,
Yes.
John Walsh,
Yes.
Katie Barr.
Then if I could have a motion to adjourn the meeting at 8:11.
Moved. Second.
Leslie Lauritsen, second by Dr. Galt.
Who was the first?
Leslie Lordson.
Vicki Cullinan,
Yes.
Natasha Danager,
Yes.
Kelly Galt, Leslie Lauritsen, Amy Marr, Jean Malik, Kathy Malloy,
Yes.
Lauren McCardle, Erna Masick, Kristen Paul,
Yes.
Angela Stallion, Apache Valavala,
Yes.
John Walsh,
Yep.
Katie Barr, Christopher Blaylock.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. And I'll send you out details specifically on our final plans for the 13th and the 14th, so we keep you informed. And if you have any questions, you all have my email address, so please feel free to email me or call me. So thank you.